everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Miles and I like to talk about books. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate you. So today is January 1st, 2024. This video will probably drop a few days after that, but I wanted to go over and rank every book that I read in 2023. I read 124 books, so not as many as I did last year because I intentionally scaled things back, but I did read quite a few, and I'm really excited to look over them with you. Before we get into it, I do want to mention a gift that I forgot to shout out in my last video where I talked about my Christmas book-ish haul. My girlfriend's mom made me this Goosebumps mug. Super cute, love it. But it also has my on it, Reading with Miles. So I totally forgot to mention that because I already had used it and like washed it while I was filming my last video. But today I'm drinking a brown sugar oat milk latte out of my amazing new mug. So I just had to mention that. Thank you, Mary Joy, if you're watching this. I appreciate you. Wonderful gift. So I figured let's just get right into it. I hope everybody had a nice holiday season and you're having a happy new year so far. But yeah, let's just get into it. Let's start our ranking. So let's go through our tiers. First up, we have Shirley Jackson Award. This is new favorite book status. I feel like only a few of these books are going to be in here, where Shirley Jackson is my favorite author, and there also is a real life Shirley Jackson Award. So this is me giving a book my own personal Shirley Jackson Award, where it's like, you're on par with my favorite author. This is one of my new favorite books of all time. I'm always going to think about this book. So that is Shirley Jackson Award. Does that make sense? Next up is New York Times bestseller. It was really good. It was maybe even a 5-star, but it wasn't new favorite book of all time. And this, like, you know, we might have some 4 or 5-star books in here where it's like, these were really solid books and there's a lot of merit to them and I liked them. I even loved some of them, but they're not quite to that perfect level. Next 2 tiers are they kind of go together in a way. I read a lot of books this year, and you will see that are very like campy and a little ridiculous. And I read a lot of Goosebumps books. And maybe not all Goosebumps books will go in this tier, but the real vibes with the R.L. Slay tier are that like, it was campy in a good way, and I really enjoyed it. Stephen King, below that, however, is a little more derogatory. I still have love for Stephen King. If you watched my like 5-star ratings I regret video, if you want to hear me talk more about Stephen King, basically I have love for him, but he disappoints me. And I think a lot of the books that go in the Stephen King tier are also going to be like things that an older man like Stephen King would enjoy. I don't know. I'm kind of just like feeling out the vibe on that one. And then last are, the Stephen King ones, like, that's like a 2-star book where it's like, there were some promising things about this, like Stephen King's books, but I just like I was disappointed, or maybe parts of it were a little offensive, you know? And then last tier is our lowest tier, and that is Why Did You Write This? Which I feel like is pretty self-explanatory. I'm hoping those tiers will be enough for everything that I have going on. Maybe we'll add a tier, we'll see. I've also been having a ton of computer problems recently, so hopefully my computer doesn't just like totally shut down while I'm doing this. Let's just get right into it. Let's start with 101 books to read before you're murdered. This book was fine. I enjoyed it. It gave me a lot of good book recommendations, and it was funny and silly. So I'm gonna put it in R.L. Slay. Next up, we have Goosebumps. Oh my God, I just realized like I cannot see all the titles on this because they're really small. I'm doing my best. We got Goosebumps, Deep Trouble. I am gonna give this also disclaimer, I have like not thought about some of these like since I read it. So you are seeing me like work through these emotions in real time. Next up is R.L. Stine's Deep Trouble. I enjoyed this one. I'm gonna put it in R.L. Slay. It was good, it wasn't perfect. Next up is One Day at Horrorland. I am really tempted to put this one in, I don't know. I'm also going to put it in R.L. Slay because it was a really nice Goosebumps book, but it wasn't, there's some things about it that I didn't love. Next up is Stay Out of the Basement, which I am going to put this in New York Times bestseller. I think this is one of the best Goosebumps books. I'm kind of going rapid fire through these because I've already spoken about them in my Goosebumps video. So if you want to hear more about it, please watch that. Next up, I have Welcome to Dead House. And I really did enjoy this one as well. This one is going to go in R.L. Slay. It deals with some like really heavy themes of death. I think what sets Stay Out of the Basement apart and like why I put it in New York Times bestseller is because it is like actually really scary if you think about it too much. And that's my favorite kind of Goosebumps book, is when you think about it and you're like, wait, like the implications of this are very disturbing. Like they find out that their dad has been a plant this whole time. And so they've just been like staying alone in this house with this like scary plant hybrid man that like tied up their dad. Like that's freaky. I don't like that. Next up, we have Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. This is going into Stephen King. I did not enjoy this one. Parts of it felt culturally insensitive, and I didn't really like it. It did have some like good scary moments, like a Stephen King book, but it just was not for me. Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, I think, is also gonna go in Stephen King, where it was just like not on the same level as the other ones. I didn't really have that great of a time. Also, if any of my ratings differ from my initial Goodreads rating, if you follow me on there, this is just like after I've taken time from things and maybe changed my mind a little bit on something. Some things might have been a 5-star and now is lower. I don't know. My opinions, I feel like, only get stronger over time, so let's just see what happens. Next up, we have Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I do not fuck with this book. I'm putting this in Why Did You Write This? This is a classic, and I don't hate all classics or anything, but it is just like a boring ghost story that I didn't enjoy. That's all I got. Like, I just don't like it. And it also, like, the analysis of it comes down to like, oh, this woman was hysterical because she was in love with this guy, so that's why all of this happened. And I just think Henry James's writing is so fucking dry that like I never want to read anything from him again. So I'm putting this in Why Did You Write This? Next up is a kind of controversial, weird book, and that's Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright. I have some mixed feelings on this. It follows like 2 gay serial killers as they're like kind of like falling. I think it's in like the late 80s or early 90s or something like that. And like they're obsessed with each other. They're like having sex with each other, but they're also like, it's one of the most graphic books I've ever read in terms of like sex, blood, gore, fucking like it gets kind of every place you're thinking right now. Cannibalism, some things that I won't mention on YouTube. It goes there. Like it really goes there. So it is a lot. I did have a lot of fun reading it though. Like this is not the kind of book that like I'm ever really gonna recommend to anybody, but I am gonna put it in R.L. Slay because there are some like, it has that like campiness to it and it's very over the top. And I definitely like, I think I gave it a 3.5. Like there were parts that I didn't love about this book, but so that's where it goes. Next up is Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. That is going to go in New York Times bestseller. I loved that book. I gave it 5 stars. It has definitely like faded from my memory a little bit, but I really enjoyed it and it's definitely one of my new favorite classics. Next up is a reread. So, I mean, I'm not like, this isn't a shock that this is going to go in Shirley Jackson Award, and that is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. I love this book. It is one of my favorites of all time, and I just love revisiting it every winter. I'll probably reread it again soon. It is just one of my all-time favorites. It is all like dark, gothic, erotic fairy tale retellings, done through like a feminist lens before it became like overplayed, I feel like, in recent years. I love it. I love Angela Carter's writing. It is just like delicious. And so yeah, this is one of my favorites ever. Next up, we have Tales of the Great White, which was a like childhood book that I was really into, that I read for my Shark Week reading vlog. I'm gonna put it in Stephen King because there were some culturally insensitive things. And I liked this book a lot when I was a kid because I was obsessed with sharks, and it was like a collection of great white shark scary stories, but it aged pretty poorly. It also, of course, like, you know, demonizes sharks a little bit. I think there's literally a story titled Demon Shark, so didn't love that. Next up is Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. I don't know if I'm putting this in New York Times bestseller or Shirley Jackson Award because I love Alison Bechdel so much. And I read Dykes to Watch Out For was like one of my favorite books of last year, if not my favorite. And I read Fun Home very, very early in the year and I just adored it. I'm gonna put it in New York Times bestseller for now. If Dykes to Watch Out For was here, it would be in Shirley Jackson Award. I don't know. I need to think on it because I really, really loved Fun Home, but I feel like I don't think about it all the time every day. And I think about Dykes to Watch Out For like literally every day of my life. Next up, we have Donna Tartt's The Secret History. This is gonna go into New York Times bestseller. I really liked this book. I have heard of some people's like complaints about some insensitive stuff in the book, and I kind of like feel like I need to like look further into that. I think it's kind of a complicated book, but it is very well written and I had a good time reading it. It was like my girlfriend's favorite book of the year. It was not my favorite book of the year. I had other books that I loved a lot more, but this was a really, really solid book and I feel like it did live up to the hype, and if you are interested in reading this, you really should. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's nothing I can say about The Secret History that hasn't been said already, so I'm just like not really going to. I have Books of Blood, Volume 2 by Clive Barker up next. This is going into R.L. Slay. I really, really enjoyed this book. Volume 1 was better though. Like that would go in New York Times bestseller. It's just a collection of really great, gory, crazy horror stories from the 80s. And Clive Barker is kind of an icon. So I really enjoyed reading that. Next up is The Fisherman by John Langan. This is going into Stephen King because I feel like Stephen King would really enjoy this book. It felt like a great horror novel for like old men. I was really disappointed because on paper, like it was everything I would love, but it just like did not pan out for me. It was like a cosmic horror, which I fuck with, but it was just really long and boring and I just didn't enjoy it. Next up is Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix. I don't like Grady Hendrix, but this is my favorite book of his because it's a nonfiction and because I learned a lot. This is very similar to like 101 horror books to read before you're murdered. This is going in R.L. Slay because it was fun and campy and I got good book recommendations from it. Next up is The Silver Bullet and Other American Witch Stories. This is kind of complicated because this was a research book for me and it definitely was offensive at points. It's from like the early 50s, I think, just collecting witch lore, Appalachian witch lore specifically. So it has a lot of insensitive stuff going on in here. However, it was really, really helpful for my research. So this is going to go in R.L. Slay. Next up is Care Work, which was a like memoir and also a collection of essays about disability justice. I really enjoyed this one. I am going to put that in New York Times bestseller. I thought that was like a really impactful book for me to read this year. Next up is Night's Edge by Liz Caron. I really had fun reading this book. It hasn't stuck with me that much. I got the arc for it and read it on my phone and had a really good time. It was a very quick read. It was definitely pretty campy. It definitely felt a little more YA, which nothing wrong with that, just not as much my genre. I'm gonna put this in RL Slay. I think I ended up giving it a 4-star. I liked it. Read it. It's, you know, it talks about a girl whose mom is a vampire, but really it's like a big metaphor for addiction, and it works. Like, she did a really good job. So go ahead and check that out. Next is Goosebumps, Revenge of the Mummy. This is also going in Stephen King territory. I just did not enjoy it. Watch my Goodreads, my Goosebumps vlog for more if you want to hear it. Now I have Michael McDowell's Blackwater series, the first volume, The Flood. I really, really liked this, but honestly, it hasn't stuck with me that much. I really want to read more of this series, so I'm going to put this in RL Slay, because I've read other books from Michael McDowell that I liked a lot more. So, yeah. Next up we have Goosebumps, I Live in Your Basement. This is going into Stephen King. This one was fine. But by this point of the challenge, I was kind of tired of it and like not really having a good time anymore. And next up we got Be Careful What You Wish For, another Goosebumps book. This is going in RL Slay. I was so worried. I mean, if you can see the cover of this, I was like, this is going to be culturally insensitive. And it wasn't. Shocker. So I did enjoy that. And it was just kind of a fun, I don't know, it was a fun Goosebumps book. Now we have The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. I really did not like this book, and I feel bad because I want to like Cassandra Khaw so badly. Like, so badly. And I just like don't really jive with their writing that much. I enjoyed Nothing But Black and Teeth. I gave it a 4-star. I think I would probably knock it down to maybe a 3-star. But I just loved the concept of it so much that I felt like I had to enjoy the execution. I wish they would just like write novels, which maybe that makes me an asshole. I don't know, because both of their novellas that I've read felt way too short and pretty rushed. And this one was like incomprehensible to me. It was like mermaids, plague doctor. I was like, okay, I love mermaids, obviously. Like, I was really psyched about that. But I don't know. I honestly am putting this in Why Did You Write This? I'm sorry, Cassandra Khaw. Like, no personal hate to you. I follow you on Instagram. I really like you. But I just did not, like, I don't know. This book just did not work for me at all. It was really hard to read. I've seen people say that like it felt like somebody just broke out a thesaurus and like tried to write a book with it, and that is kind of what it felt like. I just did not have a good time reading it at all. Next up we got Riddler Year One, and this is like the entire thing by Paul Dano. My king, he has my heart. I really enjoyed the beginning of this when I read the first issue last year, and then this is all of the issues compiled into one. But it kind of tapered off for that towards the end. I'm gonna put this in RL Slay. I really enjoyed it. I had a good time, but it was not perfect. I liked the art. This is just the backstory of the Riddler from the newest Batman movie, and so it was really fun. I enjoyed it. We got another Goosebumps book. This is, there's literally like over 20 Goosebumps books on here, so if you weren't here for Goosebumps, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Next up, we have Werewolf Skin by R.L. Stine. This is going in RL Slay. I liked this one. I liked how R.L. Stine has multiple werewolf stories, but this was one of my favorites. And now we got Like a Boy But Not a Boy, and this was like a collection of essays and then interviews with people about being non-binary and a parent and about being like Canadian. I did not, I don't know, I have complicated feelings towards this, and I feel like my feelings have continued to sour as I have sat on this book longer. it's just weird that like they interviewed like 10 people and it really only felt like they were centering like white people, where I feel like that was just kind of weird, and like I don't feel like I learned that much from their essays. I don't know. I just don't think it was for me. So I honestly don't really feel like I have a tier for this. But since I didn't enjoy it that much, I'm just going to put it in Stephen King. I don't know. Next up, we got White Shark by Peter Benchley. I read this in my shark vlog as well, and I like this book was fucking crazy. And I feel like my feelings on it have gotten fonder as I've had time away from this. But the reading experience was not a good time at all. So I am putting this in Stephen King. Watch my shark vlog if you want to hear more about it. It was fucking crazy. It wasn't even about a shark. It was about this like creature that the Nazis created and are like locked in a a box, and their submarine got sunk, so it sat at the bottom of the ocean for a long time, and like it was a whole thing. And I did not enjoy the reading experience. I did like how campy and crazy it was, but I just did not have a good time really, so it's going in Stephen King. We got Wake the Bones. This was one of the first books I read last year, and unfortunately, I felt that it was really boring. So this is going to go in Stephen King as well. I don't really remember that much about it, and I didn't enjoy it that much. I'm sorry. This was one of my friend Sunny here on BookTube, who I just absolutely love. They kept recommending Princess Florinda in the 40 Flight Tower. It has been quite a while since I read it. It was one of the first books that I read of last year, I guess. But I did have a lot of fun, but it hasn't stuck with me that much. So we're gonna put it in R.L. Slay. Now we got Below the Edge of Darkness, which was a nonfiction memoir about this woman who worked as a marine biologist and like did a lot of important work towards like submersibles and stuff. I also read this in my shark vlog and I really enjoyed it. It wasn't campy at all though, but it was definitely not New York Times bestseller. Do I need another tier? Like, that's what that is for now. And Below the Edge of Darkness was just fine. I'm also gonna add a few other things into that I feel like pretty neutral on. Like, wow, what a pleasant reading experience. I'm glad I spent my time reading that, but I don't have like strong opinions on. Okay, next up we have Loot. I did not enjoy this book. This is going into Why Did You Write This? I can't even tell you that much about it. It was kind of marketed as like a midsummer vibe. It was just boring and weird, and I didn't like the main character, and it did not feel like midsummer. It just felt like a ripoff. I just didn't have a good time. Sorry. Next up is Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This book was crazy, but I did like it. There were a lot of things I liked about it. I'm gonna put this in R.L. Slay because it was crazy and it had a lot of unhinged, crazy fucking moments. If you're not into the like, I wouldn't call it extreme horror, but it's definitely adjacent. I have another book coming up at some point from Alison Rumfitt that is definitely extreme horror in my mind. But it's not for the faint of heart. It did have a lot of parallels to Haunting of Hill House, which is like one of my favorite books of all time. So I did really appreciate that. But all in all, it definitely was like kind of middle of the road for me, but slightly good because I did appreciate some things that it did. Next up is probably my favorite book of the entire year, and that is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I fucking loved this book. I think I'm going to make a quick best and worst books of 2023 in the next few days, so like keep an eye out for that, and I think I'll talk about it more in detail. But this was just like, It reminded me of another one of my favorite books ever, which is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. But it is just like beautiful and heart-wrenching, and there's lesbians, and it's about the ocean, and this it is just like about grief and love, and it is just so good. Like, one of the most beautiful books I've ever read in my life. One of my new favorite books of all time. Shirley Jackson Award, Julia Armfield, you are everything to me. I fucking love this book. Like, perfect book for me. It just feels like that book was written for Miles. I know it wasn't, but Julia Armfield has a book coming out, I think, hopefully this year, maybe next year, but soon. And I am so excited. She is like quickly becoming one of my new favorite authors. So next we got Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I'm gonna put this in New York Times bestseller. It's definitely faded from my mind a little bit since I read it. I mean, I feel like I don't even need to introduce it. I feel like everybody knows this book and what it's about. But it was a fun time, and it hasn't stuck with me a ton, but the reading experience of it was really great. I was really, really into it. So I'm gonna put it right up there. Next we have All This Could Be Different. I really enjoyed this book. I am also gonna put this one in New York Times bestseller. I can't remember that much about it now, but once again, the reading experience of this was so good. And I liked this like messy main character, and I was really interested in her life and her girlfriends and just the messiness of it all. I really enjoyed. Next, we have The Crocodile Bride by Ashley Bell Peterson. This is going in New York Times bestseller. Aesthetically, this was like a perfect book for me. I really, really enjoyed it. And I will say Ashley Bell Peterson sent me the book, so thank you so much for that. I really, really appreciate it. And I loved this book. I thought it was really, really great. It was following a girl who was growing up in, now I can't remember, but it was like in the swamp, and I fuck with that. You know, I'm a Florida girl, and it just followed her childhood, and it was pretty sad at a lot of points, but I really enjoyed it. Next, we have this little graphic novel that I read, Wait Till Helen Comes. I'm putting this in just fine. It was just fine. I liked the story. It was nice and creepy. It's based off of a story, another story by, I don't know, somebody. Classic ghost story. But I didn't like the art. I thought the art was kind of boring. A History of Fear by Luc Dumas. This is going in R.L. Slay. This one was really fun. Something about it was like holding it back from being like really solid writing, like really good stuff. So I think I originally rated it a 4. I might like bump it down a little bit, but I mean, it just follows this guy who's writing a history of fear and writing about the devil, and we kind of have like some unreliable narrator stuff going on, and it was fun and campy. So next we got Strega. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember like anything about this. This is going in just fine. Now we got Lone Women by Victor LaValle, New York Times bestseller. I fucking love Victor LaValle, and I will just continue to read anything that he puts out because it's always good. I voted for this for the Goodreads Choice Award for Best Horror, and I'm pissed that it didn't win, but like whatever, that's fine. Next we got A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. Just fine. This book was totally like, I feel so neutral on it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was just fine. Here's a book I didn't like. What the hell is this called? I don't know why I cropped it so I could not see like any of these titles. What was this fucking called? Looking Glass Sound. Why did you write this? I liked some of Catriona, like I'm friends with her. Catriona Ward's past books. Really enjoyed Sundial last year, just aesthetically. It was really fun. Looking Glass Sound was so weird, so long, hated the way it was written. I thought it was like ironic and funny and campy a little at first, and then it just like was really taking itself seriously. And then it also used like gay people as a plot twist. I just did not like it. It just left a really bad taste in my mouth. So like, why did you fucking write this, Catriona? Sorry. Next we got Dykette. Controversial opinion. This book has like 3 stars on Goodreads. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I think about it all the time, and maybe it wasn't the best written. I don't know. I'm not a scholar, okay, guys? I'm putting this in New York Times bestseller. I loved it. I had a good time. I liked how messy and fun it was. It's also like one of the first books I've read that like explores butch femme dynamics, especially in like the current time. I think it takes place in like 2020 or something like that. And so I think part of the reason I liked it so much was that representation, and I was kind of willing to forgive some of the issues with it, but I loved this book. So if you didn't like it, that's fine, but I liked it. And if you are butch or femme, you should read it. Next up, we got Dogs of Summer. I really liked this book, but I don't really remember that much about it. But it did inspire me a lot with some stuff that I'm currently writing. I'm putting it in just fine because not that much. I mean, it's about these 2 girls growing up, homoerotic friendship ensues, but a lot of it didn't stick with me that much. So we're just gonna like, it's just fine. We're gonna put it in just fine. We got Chlorine up next. This is gonna go R.L. Slay. Something about it was keeping it from hitting that New York Times bestseller, from being like super memorable and something I think about all the time. But I really liked it. I liked mermaid, body horror, teenage girl, swimming. All of those things are right up my alley. So it was really fun and I did enjoy it. But for some reason, something about it kept it from being a true, like, really one of my favorites, but that's okay. Next, we got Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. I don't know, guys. I didn't really like this book. It felt pretty cliche. It's like a horror that released this year that focuses on like conversion therapy. And it just felt really forgettable and I didn't really enjoy it. I'm putting this in Stephen King. I also like, I don't know, a man writing this like coming of age lesbian story was a little weird to me, and you know, maybe call me out on that if I'm wrong, but I just didn't. I don't know. I didn't vibe with it. It just felt like oversimplified, and I felt like he didn't really understand the character he was writing. Next, we have The Guest by Emma Cline. This is gonna go in just fine. I was really looking forward to this because I really like Emma Cline, and I still really like the vibes of this book, like following a woman who is like kind of going in and out of a bunch of people's lives. She's a guest in people's lives, and watching her like scam all of these people in like a seaside tourist town. That, like, the premise of it I really enjoyed, but actually reading the book felt very like samey, like just kind of felt like the same thing was happening over and over again. Next, we got Killer. Maybe, I don't remember who this is by. Peter Tonkin, maybe? This is going into why did you write? No, this is going into Stephen King because, I mean, this is kind of the epitome of Stephen King, honestly. I had a good time. Oh, you know what? Now that I have the Just Fine category, I'm putting a couple of these books in there. Okay, that's perfect. Okay. I had a good time reading this. I loved that it was about a killer whale. It had a good horror premise, but it was culturally insensitive, and I just didn't like it. Next up, we got The Beast You Are by Paul Tremblay. I was so excited for this book, and to be honest with you, I DNF'd it like 70% through. Something about the last story, like the narrator to the audiobook, The Beast You Are was the story. it was just not working for me, and I just could not do it. I think Stephen King would love this one. It was a fine collection of scary stories, but I have read, Paul Tremblay is one of my favorites. Like, I've read a lot better from, no, I don't know. Is it just fine? I don't know. Okay, we're gonna put in Stephen King. Sorry. I'm sorry, Paul. I really like you. I'm Goodreads friends with you. I love your books, but this one just like missed the mark for me. Now we have Scare Waves by Trevor Henderson. This is the epitome of R.L. Slay. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a perfect middle grade, but there were a few things about it that just like weren't great for me as an older reader. I think if I was a kid, I would have just absolutely fucking devoured this book, but it just needed some more character development. It kind of felt like just a compilation of scary moments, which that's fucking awesome. And like, I am really happy that Trevor Henderson is like giving kids actually scary shit to read, because I would have loved this book when I was a kid. So I'm putting it in R.L. Slay. I really need to speed up because I've already been filming for 37 minutes. And I have a lot of books left. So let's speed it up. Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft. I loved this book. It was just a nice witchy, I don't know. I really enjoyed this. It splits everything up into like a story, and then it tells you some spell work or some crafts that you can do, and then a personal reflection by the author. And that was just like a really unique witchcraft book, and I just absolutely loved it. A Night in Terror Tower is going to go into R.L. Slay. That one is really fun. Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects, R.L. fucking Slay. This book is campy as fuck and like so over the top and like crazy, very crazy at points, but I had so much fun reading it. Big trigger warning for this book in general. It's crazy, but I loved it in a funny, silly way. Next up is Thin Air by Michelle Paver. I'm gonna put this in New York Times bestseller. This is a really, really solid ghost story, just like a perfect ghost story. And I have another book from Michelle Paver later down the list that we'll talk about that is also, you know, it's very similar. And I love like an adventure mountain climbing deal, and it's a historical fiction, and it's told epistolary. So it's just a good time. It's a perfect ghost story. Would so recommend. Next we have Mimosa, which is a really fun graphic novel. I'm gonna put this up in New York Times bestseller because I really enjoyed it, and it felt like a modern version of Dykes to Watch Out For, which is amazing. Next we got There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce. This is going into New York Times bestseller. I loved this book. This was by Morgan Parker, and it was just a beautiful poetry book that really, really stuck with me. It was funny. It was insightful. I really liked Morgan Parker's writing, and just it's littered with pop culture references, which I just really enjoyed. And I read this for my research class, and so we're doing a lot to understand the research that authors did and to do our own research, where it's like, if you don't recognize this pop culture reference, and it's just everywhere. I was Googling so many things while I read this book, and it was just wonderful. Now we got Dolls of Our Lives. This is going in R.L. Slay. This is a nonfiction that recently published based off of the Dolls of Our Lives podcast, which I haven't listened to. My girlfriend this year got back into American Girl because she was really into it as a kid, and we're working on healing our inner child. And she got back into American Girl and got all of her old dolls out and has just been really into it recently, and I am very supportive of it because I think it's really adorable and sweet. And I liked American Girl when I was a kid, but I wasn't as into it as she was. But I love like the historical girls, and it's just so interesting. So I wanted to listen to that book, and I had a good time. It definitely, like, I don't know. The women who run the podcast, it definitely was like a little too millennial humor for my taste. But so that's why it's gonna go in R.L. Slay, because like it was a little silly, it was a little campy, but I still really liked it. Next up we got Big Swiss by Jen Began. I don't really know where to put this. I originally rated it 4 stars. I might have originally even rated it 5 stars. And then I heard some criticisms of it, and then I also, like, it just generally really faded from my memory. But I did have a good time. It was just like a crazy ride. I'm gonna put this in RL Slay because it was fun and crazy. Unfortunately, it really hasn't stuck with me that much, which is a bummer. We got Vampire Breath by R.L. Stine. This one was fun, but I don't really remember it that much. So we're gonna put it in just fine. Now we have 10th of December by George Saunders. This was a really, really, really good short story collection that like really inspired me. I'm gonna put that in New York Times bestseller. Okay, we have some fucking bangers coming up right now, so I am really excited to talk about these. I haven't gotten the chance to talk about The Reformatory by Tanana Reeve Dew. This is easily going up to Shirley Jackson Award. One of the best books I have read in a long time. One of the best books I've read this year, easy. So fucking good. If you have not read The Reformatory, you need to read it. It's a historical fiction by Tanana Reeve Dew, who is on this list again later. And I just love her writing. She is buddies with Jordan Peele. If that, like, I feel like that tells you all you need to know, where it's like, they both, I just love everything that both of them do. And I loved this book. It made me cry. It follows this kid. I can't remember what time period it is. I'm gonna say in like the 1930s or 40s. He gets sent away. They live in Florida, and he gets sent away to a reformatory school, which is horribly abusive. But he finds out like that he can see ghosts. And we're also following his sister, who's trying to get him, like, break him out of the reformatory. But it is really heavy at times, and it is a really scary book, just in like a real world kind of sense. And I just love these characters, and I just became so attached to them. And this book was just fantastic. So if you're into historical fiction at all or horror, you gotta read this. It is such a good book. Next up is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is also going up there. This was a reread. Annihilation is one of my favorite books ever. These 4 books, just so good. So fucking good. I feel like I do a reread of Annihilation like every year because I love it. Now we have Daphne by Josh Malerman. This book was really weird, but I had a good time. So I'm gonna put it in RL Slay because it was campy and stupid and fun, and I had a great time. Next we have Down the Drain by Julia Fox. Everybody was talking about this book. I thought it was fantastic. I'm putting it in New York Times bestseller. So good. Julia Fox is an icon. I truly believe that. And I just ate that fucking book up. It was so crazy and so entertaining. Next we have Milk, Blood, Heat, which I read for research on some Florida stories that I'm writing, and I really enjoyed this. Unfortunately, it didn't stick with me a ton, so I am gonna go ahead and put this in just fine. Now we have Jawbone, which was actually, like, I really fucking liked this book. I'm putting this in New York Times bestseller. I didn't, like, initially love it that much, but it has just been, like, percolating in my head. It follows a group of teenage girls growing up and uses creepypastas and, like, internet horror. It's almost like a metaphor for girlhood in a really strange way that works really well. And if you know me, you know I was a huge creepypasta kid. So it just, like, hit home and really, really inspired me for my own writing. So I really enjoyed that book. Now we got Belle of the Ball, which was just the cutest graphic novel ever. I'm gonna put this in New York Times bestseller. I really enjoyed it. Had butch femme representation in a graphic novel for teens, so I fucking loved that. Also, it was just so cute. It was so cute. I loved the art style, and it was so adorable. Now we got Doctoring the Devil, Notebooks of an Appalachian Conjure Man by Jake Richards. I really enjoyed this one. It was kind of just for research though. And so like I feel like I don't have like super strong opinions about it. Like it wasn't like a life-changing book for me. So I'm gonna put it in just fine. This tier list again is getting chunky. We've got Writing the Nightmare by Lisa Tuttle, who I had never read anything from, but I got the arc of this and I realized she was actually mentioned in Paperbacks from Hell. She was a pretty prolific author, still is, but in like the 80s horror scene, and her short stories were just like really fucking solid and pretty scary and just very dreamlike, as Writing the Nightmare implies, I guess. Dreamlike and freaky, and I just really enjoyed them, so we're gonna put that in RL Slay. Now we got Blood on the Tracks Volume 1. This was a manga about like an overbearing mother that like kills for her son, kind of, and I had heard good things about it, and I was like, let's just check this out. I liked the first volume a lot. I'm gonna put in RL Slay. Let me scroll down and find the second volume, because that is going in Why Did You Write This? Because it just went way too far and made me feel really icky and deeply uncomfortable, and I did not need to read more of it. So I know that that series has a lot of fans out there because of how disturbing it is, but it was just a little too much for me, and I don't feel like I need to read it anymore. Next, we got Brutes by Diz Tate. This is complicated. It feels similar to Jawbone to me. I don't know what to put it in, but it hasn't stuck with me that much. We're gonna put it in just fine, unfortunately. I really liked it, and I cannot wait to see what this author comes out with next. And maybe even if I reread it physically, like I will come to love it more. But it just really has not stuck with me, unfortunately. And it's a bummer because I was convinced this book was like made for me. It like follows a group of girls growing up in Florida who are like fucked up. And like, come on, that was my childhood. But it just really has not stuck with me. So that's fine. Now we got Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. Honestly, I read this when I was going through it earlier this year, and I do not remember that much about it. I'm gonna put it in just fine. Sorry. Next, we have Sonia's Chickens by Phoebe Wall, and like, this is like a picture book, so don't call me out for that. But I did want to rate it because I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna put it in New York Times bestseller because it made me fucking cry. This is a great children's book. I work at a toy store, and so like I'm a connoisseur of children's books, and this one was something special, but goddamn, it made me sad. Just be warned. Now we got Conjure Women, which unfortunately I also read during a pretty bad time for me, so I don't remember it that much. So this is also going in just fine. I would love to revisit it because I really liked the premise of the book, but it was kind of a longer book and I just found myself getting really distracted. But then also my loan was up, so I had to finish reading it. So it was just like a whole thing. So that is probably my fault and not the fault of the author. Next, we have one of my favorites. This was Out There Screaming by Jordan Peele, or is edited by Jordan Peele. That is gonna go in New York Times bestseller. It's not up there as Shirley Jackson Award. Well, is it? It was really fucking good. You know what? But I don't think about it like every day. I feel like that's what makes it a true Shirley Jackson Award S tier. So we're gonna put it in New York Times bestseller, but it's gonna go like first up there. I don't feel good about Goosebumps being next to that, but it's really close. It is so close. But just because it's a story collection and some of it falls a little flat, but this is easily one of my favorite story collections. Would recommend it if you're into horror. Edited by Jordan Peele. What more do you need? I got the arc for it too, which made me feel really good. I was like, wow, look at me. So next we got Come and Get It by Kylie Reed. This was also an arc, and this isn't even out yet. and I got to read this like 6 months ago. I'm gonna give this an RL Slay because I did really enjoy it, and I would highly recommend it if you are into this like literary fiction genre. It follows some messy college antics and talks about race and really focuses on class differences in college. And the main character was an RA, and if you've been following the channel, you know I was an RA, so like I really related to a lot of it. But it hasn't stuck with me a ton. I did like it though. It also got like really fucking dark at points. So just like be warned. I kind of thought it was gonna be like a fun, silly romp, and then it got pretty dark, but I liked it. But it definitely had that like kind of campy like college movie vibe to it, where it's just like we're gonna follow this character and just like see how her life gets messed up. So that's going in RL Slay. Now we have White Cat Black Dog by Kelly Link, and this story collection was really fucking good. I read it quite a while ago and my memory is pretty bad, so like I don't remember a ton of it, but the first story in this is like one of the best short stories I have ever read. So I feel like just because of that, I'm putting that in New York Times bestseller. Next we have Kindred by Octavia Butler. This book was so fucking good. Like, I loved this, and I immediately kind of recommended it to a bunch of people. I'm gonna put it in New York Times bestseller up top because it is close to Shirley Jackson Award, but something about it, I don't know, isn't like, I don't think about it every day like I do with these books up here. That's really what separates them. But I really loved Kindred, and if you haven't read it, you should. It follows a woman who, it takes place, it's written and like set in the mid 70s, and then it follows a woman who is like sent back to wow, slavery time. And it is really sad and hard to read at some points, but also like super readable, and you just like need to see what happens next. It was a fantastic book. I'm so glad I finally got around to it because I've been meaning to read it forever, and I just loved it. Now we have All the Living and the Dead, which was a nonfiction about all the people that are death workers, and I really, really liked this book. I think I gave it 5 stars. I do really like it. I definitely don't think about it all the time though. I'm gonna put it in New York Times bestseller. I read a lot of good books this year. Fuck yeah. I have been in such a massive reading slump lately that like I don't feel like I've read good books this year, but now I'm feeling good about it. Now we have Brainworms by Alison Rumfitt. This fucking book, man, like, ew, this book was so gross. This was not for me. But I had a good time reading it, and I like know there is an audience for it, and it was definitely extreme horror. I don't know where to put this. Honestly, for me, it was just fine. But if you're into extreme horror, especially like queer and trans extreme horror, check it out. It was just too fucking yucky. It was yucky. It was gross. I didn't like it. So that's what I got. Sorry, it's just fine. How I Learned to Fly. I did, like, for some reason this book pissed me off, and I'm just putting that in Stephen King, and I don't want to elaborate on it. Watch my Goodreads, oh my god, watch my Goosebumps vlog if you want to see. Now we have Howard's End by E.M. Forster. Just fine. It was a classic that I read for a class. It was not bad. It was relatively entertaining, but I just like did not feel connected to it at all. Now we got Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. I really, really liked this book. I am putting this in New York Times bestseller. If you haven't read it, it was billed as like a literary horror novel about family and queerness, and it follows this family that raises a little fucking monster, and it is messy as fuck, and it is crazy, and I really enjoyed it. Next up, we got Swamp, which I don't know. I'm putting this in Why Did You Write This? Because I got the arc of this on NetGalley, which I appreciated and I was excited. I was like, ooh, swamp. I love that kind of stuff. I love swamps. I love the South. And then I found out the guy that, and then I read it and I was like, oh, this was fine. But parts of it didn't sit well with me. And it like followed like a black storyline and like talked about racism and like the KKK. And it just ended a little weird where it kind of ended with like the black character getting ignored and like his trauma was not really validated. It was like, well, we fixed the problem for now. And it's like, okay, but like the KKK still exists in this town. Like, please take care of your friend. And then I found out it was written by like a French dude who like doesn't live in America. And so I'm not saying that like people that aren't from America like don't understand, but like kind of like, because the South is such a complicated place, and I tend to not like when non-Southern authors write about the South. So I just didn't like it, and I just don't think the author did the topic justice. So that's what I got. Next we have Aquacorn Cove by Kay O'Neill. I really, really liked this book. I thought it was so cute. And I'm very easy to please with graphic novels. So this is going into New York Times bestseller because I love Kay O'Neill and I loved the whole Aquacorn Cove world. It was just so cute and beautiful and had the best illustrations. Next we have Goosebumps, A Shocker on Shock Street. This was an RL fucking slay. Like, this one was good. It was crazy. The twists and turns, the big reveal at the end had some crazy implications for the rest of the story. And watch my Goosebumps vlog if you want to know more. Next, we have a recent read for me, which was Death Valley by Melissa Broder. I was so excited for this book, and I feel like it actually didn't make too much of an impact on me, unfortunately. I'm putting it in RL Slay because I did enjoy it, and I really enjoyed the reading process, and it was like crazy and funny and campy, but I just didn't love it. Next we have Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones, which was a highly anticipated sequel to whatever the other book was. I'll put it right here. That I really, really loved. And I really enjoyed this one as well, but it honestly hasn't stuck with me that much. This is gonna go on RL Slay because I did like it and I had a really good time. Next up is Tombs by Junji Ito, which I really, really liked and thought was really fun. But honestly, these stories have not stuck with me that much, but I always fuck with Junji Ito, so that's going in RL Slay. Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. This was fun. I'm gonna put this in just fine. I was reading it in my last vlog, and it's like a romance about this girl that hooks up with this older, sexy woman and then finds out the next day that it's actually her best friend's mom, and like chaos ensues from there. It just had a lot of like cringy millennial humor. And then some of it, like, I hated the ending. I thought the ending was so cringe. And like, I don't really read romance. I read this because my girlfriend recommended it to me, and like, it was fun and I'm glad I read it, but like, I just didn't love it. Next we have Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. It's immediately going up to New York Times bestseller. I loved this story collection. I fucking love Julia Armfield. She also wrote Our Wives Under the Sea, and it is so good. Next we got The Wager. This was kind of like, this was a good book, like objectively a good book. This feels like a book you should get for your dad. And for that reason, it's going in Stephen King. I rated it relatively high, but like has not stuck with me at all. It was pretty dry historical recount. It's going to Stephen King. Stephen King would love this book. I think so. Next up, we got Goosebumps Monster Blood. Honestly, I don't remember anything about this one, so it's going in just fine. Now we have Shark Heart, a love story. Definitely a really weird book, but kind of just made for me, about this guy that has a genetic disease that causes him to slowly turn into a shark. And it was weird and kind of kooky at points, but still really heartfelt and like made me cry. And I just really enjoyed how weird and unique this premise was and how somehow the author pulled it off. So we're gonna put that in New York Times bestseller because I really, really liked it. Now We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. This book scared the fuck out of me. I read it like all in one sitting at night after my girlfriend had fallen asleep, and I was so scared, but it was kind of gimmicky. Like it's a novella about this family that gets like locked inside of their bathroom after like this gigantic storm, but then it's like implied that like, here, spoiler for like 10 seconds, it's implied that like the end of the world happened and like that the daughter caused it by like doing a spell with her girlfriend, like blah 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 blah. It was a whole thing. So it kind of, the gimmick wore away at the end, but it had some absolutely terrifying moments for me. We're gonna put this in R.L. Slay. Next we have Citizen by Claudia Rankine. I really liked this book. It was like a multimedia poetry, essays, and like photos. I read it for my research class and it was just like really, really good. So it's going in New York Times bestseller. Now we have The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones. This is going in R.L. Slay. Also, I am getting tired. I'm almost done. Thanks for sticking around for this long ass fucking video if you have. But I'm tired and I need to eat lunch, so I am about to start like running through these. The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones. It's an audio only book and it was fun. I had a good time. It follows this babysitter on a night babysitting, wow, on Halloween night, and doing a, like, I don't know, bunch of crazy shit ensues. And I really like the like babysitter stories, like scary babysitter stories when I was a kid. Those always scared the fuck out of me. So this was a nice way to bring that into my, you know, current reading. And I love anything from Stephen Graham Jones, is always fun. It was not my favorite book from him whatsoever, but I had a good time. Next we have Dark Matter by Michelle Paver. This is also going in New York Times bestseller. We'll put it right next to Thin Air because another really, really solid ghost story. And this time it's like an Arctic ghost story. And I love that kind of shit. I love a good Arctic setting. So now we got Ghost Story by Peter Straub. I have such complicated feelings towards this book and I don't hate it. Like, I think I literally gave it like 4 stars, but this just like has to go into the Stephen King tier because it has a great premise. It's very interesting, but this book does not like women and it's kind of offensive. And I wrote a paper on this book and its depiction of women, which like I feel like helped me understand my feelings towards it more. And like I still had a fun reading experience with this. Like a Stephen King book, I had fun, but it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Now we got Goosebumps, Go Eat Worms. I barely remember this book. It was just fine. Now we have The Moth Keeper by Kay O'Neill. I really enjoyed this book and I don't even know what star rating I gave it, but it did not stick with me. So we are gonna put this in just fine. I love Kay O'Neill's illustrations, but I just feel like it doesn't fit in these other categories and I really don't remember. I want to put it in New York Times bestseller, but I know that would just be lying to myself. And there's some Kay O'Neill books that I like a lot more. Next up, we got Baraska. Baraska. It's a creepypasta that I read and I counted on Goodreads. And you know what? This is fucking definition of R.L. Slay. It was campy, it was bad, it was crazy, but I had a really good time and I gave it like 3.5 stars. Next up though, we got the sequel to Baraska, and this is going in Why Did You Write This? Because this was trash. Like, it was so bad. If you want to hear a little more about Baraska, go to my creepypasta video. Thank you. Next we have Over the Garden Wall. It was like a graphic novel continuation of Over the Garden Wall, the series, and it was really fun. I had a good time. I am going to put this in R.L. Slay because it was adorable and really cute and just a nice continuation of the show. Now we have It Came From Beneath the Kitchen Sink. Honestly, this is kind of an elite Goosebumps book. Like, this one is so fucking funny to me. I'm going to put this in Oh, I just got a notification that there's somebody at my front door, but it's literally just a squirrel. I'm gonna put this in R.L. Slay because this is one of the better Goosebumps books. I really, really like it, and it is so crazy and weird and campy. Next, we have this adorable little graphic novel called Misfit Mansion. I really liked this one, and I'm going to put in R.L. Slay because it was cute and it made me happy. So yeah. Now we have Moby Dyke, which was a nonfiction like road trip book about going to the last lesbian bars in America. Unfortunately, this did not give me what I wanted. I was really, really excited, but I just did not really like the author's voice. It was very millennial humor. I am going to put this in just fine because I really liked the premise and it gave me a list of places I want to go to, but I just did not connect with it as much as I was wanting to. Next we have A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. I have been wanting to read Flannery O'Connor for years. I chose to like not rate this book or not really talk about it because I was like, holy shit, I did not realize how racist this woman was. And that has been hard for me to grapple with because I know that like she's a lot of people's like favorite author of ever. And I'm like, did I just start with the wrong collection? Like, I did see value in her writing 100%, but yikes. Like, I'm putting this in the Stephen King tier, which like, please don't come for me, but she was so racist, guys. Like, am I missing something? I don't know. Like, why does it... and her writing was good. And I know there's, like, a lot of historical context here. So, like, please enlighten me in the comments. But it was just really hard for me to get past that because it made me uncomfortable. Silent Came the Monster was a fiction retelling of the 1914 shark attacks. And I just did not like it. I'm putting it in why did you write this? Why did you write this? I thought it was a nonfiction. I don't really like the fictionalized retellings of specific historical events. Like Amakatsu's books never really sit right with me. It just feels kind of weird. Like it feels kind of weird to like take this thing that happened that was awful and just fictionalize it and make these real people characters. It just never really sits right with me. But I was like really super interested, like obsessed with the 1914 shark attacks when I was a kid, or is it 1916? I don't remember, but I was obsessed with these shark attacks when I was a kid, so I knew a lot about them. And so I was like specifically really excited for this book, and it just didn't deliver. I didn't really enjoy it that much. Next we have The Good House by Tanana Reeve Dew, another amazing Tanana Reeve Dew book. This is going up to New York Times bestseller. It was really, really good, but not as good as The Reformatory. And there's just a few like criticisms I have about it of just like the ending is a little weird. I've come to appreciate it more with time, but at first it like totally gave me whiplash. It is a really good like family curse horror novel. So I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in that kind of stuff. I just love Tanana Reeve Dew though. Like this is really up there on the New York Times bestseller list for me. Now let's do some rapid fire goosebumps. Curse of Camp Cold Lake is honestly one of my favorites. So we are going to, oh, this is not working. So we are going to put this in New York Times bestseller. This is, oh my God, what is this one called? I wish I could see it. What is this one called? The Girl Who Cried Monster. This is going in R.L. Slay. That one is fun, silly. A Haunted Mask, that's gonna go in New York Times bestseller because that is one of the better ones. Haunted Mask 2, why did you write this? I did not like it. It's literally the same book as The Haunted Mask, but with a different character. The Horror at Camp Jelly Jam was the best kids cosmic horror that I've ever read. That is going to New York Times bestseller. That was crazy. Sarah Waters' The Little Stranger. It was just fine. It is like a gothic horror novel. I want to read more Sarah Waters books because she's a lesbian. That's all I know about her. But it was not a very lesbian book, which is sad. It was just fun. It was just fun. Now we got The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. That is a New York Times bestseller. I really, really enjoyed that one. I had a good time. Now we have The Family Arcana, which is like a tarot deck of like, but you can shuffle it and tell stories, and it was on Goodreads, so I counted it. I'm gonna put this in R.L. Slay because it's a little gimmicky, but it's fun and I had a good time. Welcome to Camp Nightmare. Good. R.L. Slay. Okay, Why I'm Afraid of Bees is the epitome of R.L. Slay. That book was fucking crazy. That's all I'll say. And last but not least is the last book I read this year. You can see it, it's very tiny. Hellbore presents Yuletide Hauntings. And so this was more of like a zine. It was like a Christmassy zine specifically of this British like folklore magazine that I really enjoy. And this was like really, really nice. I really enjoyed this. I'm actually going to put this in New York Times bestseller because it just compiled some really great ghost stories and it was the perfect way to end the year. It was the last book I read this year. I read it last night and it was just great. So that is my ranking of every book I read this year. So that is my tier list for 2023. A lot of books on here. I had a really good reading year, honestly. Like, I've been in a big slump the past couple months, so it has been like hard for me to like appreciate all of the things that I've read this year, but I thought this would kind of make me appreciate my reading this year. And you know what? I had a pretty good reading year. I have 2 new books in my all-time favorites, a lot of books that I loved this year, and a lot of books that were really fun, and honestly really not that many that I hated. So I am pretty pleased with that. I hope you liked this video. I know it was very, very long, but if you enjoyed it, please leave me a like and subscribe down below if you want. I am trying to hit 1,000 subscribers sooner than later, so I would love to have you part of the club. But yeah, my Goodreads, my Instagram, and my letterboxd are in the description down below. I hope you have a wonderful new year, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.